Now, today we are going to be talking about the RPM series, continuing on with that, and going on with Ranger Series Green, Ziggy Grover. Now, unlike the other characters on this list here, we have Ziggy's backstory only starting a few days before the events of the Power Rangers first episode. Now, it would be found out that he is associated with Fresno Bob, one of the leaders of the Scorpion cartels, and which is basically one of the 5 main cartels that run through the criminal underworld of Corinth. Even in the end of the world, there is still criminal activity still taking place during this apocalyptic event. Well, he'd be a part of this criminal syndicate and would go on several different missions for them. However, he would be a bumbling idiot through most of them and cause many of his missions to fail because he was kind of a goof and not very coordinated most of his time. Now, they would give him one last chance to prove his worth to the cartels. However, he also had a little backstory of that he was very supportive of the orphanages of the local area, especially an orphanage full of ill children that did not have any resources to get any proper care and treatment for all their afflictions. Now, if you remember, there was probably still a lot of kids that are without parents and without any money to pay for anything because a year ago, the end of the world had just happened. Well, Ziggy would be given his last big chance to prove himself and would find out that the truck he was driving would contain $5 million worth of medical supplies. And letting his mind and heart speak to him more, he decided he was going to give all those medical supplies to the children and the orphanage. However, he was afraid for his life and afraid for the orphanage would be targeted because of his actions and fled outside of Corinth. Now, the only person who would know about this action, though most believing that he was the one who stole all the loot and that he hid it someplace away, was another henchman that did not rat him out because, as you remember, snitches get stitches. Now, this other henchman would reveal to the Rangers later on in the series that Ziggy was not a bad person, that he was doing it for all the right reasons. He's just kind of a moron and did not have any backup plans. So that is where we meet Ziggy at the beginning of episode 1, where he is hijacking Dylan, who would later turn out to be the Black Ranger. Well, we would not know who he was at first. He was just a lone survivor in this abysmal world that the Earth had become. But he tries to hijack Dylan with let's just say a muffler. Yes, he pretended it was a blaster, but Dylan quickly figured out it was a muffler, and that was the beginning of their strange friendship. Now, Dylan and Ziggy would be able to make it out of there after fighting off some grinders, and basically not figuring out at the time that Dylan was not a robot synthoid of sorts, but he'd continue this going, begin their friendship, and they would somehow get past the guns and army of Vengex into Corinth City, only to be immediately arrested after Ziggy reveals who the Power Rangers were to Dylan, who had no idea who they are, and find out that Dylan is part robot of sorts, or parts of him are slowly turning into a robot. Now, Dylan, I don't think, knew this, but probably was not surprised by it either because he could do some amazing feats such as beat up grinders with his bare hands, but Ziggy didn't see any of that. Now, the Rangers would hear about Dylan being thrown in jail, and Ziggy would be following him. Now, most people didn't care about Ziggy. The 3 Rangers were more intrigued by Dylan, though in truth it was Summer who was really intrigued and would attempt to get her out. Now, Dylan would be forced, while in prison, to protect Ziggy, basically because Ziggy, he was still a wanted man because of what he had done with the $5 million worth of medical supplies. And in prison, they were seeking him out and trying to bully him to reveal and or kill him. Dylan protected him and trashed the entire prison essentially until guards had to haul him off. Now, Dylan would agree to become their Black Series Ranger with only the deal that Ziggy joined them, which was probably what saved Ziggy's life. Now, Ziggy would join as an assistant, not as a ranger, and he was never meant to be a ranger. He would actually become the annoyance early on of most of the characters. Even Dylan, throughout the rest of the series, he kind of got, well, annoyed with him more because, well, Ziggy is definitely one thing. He's a talker and doesn't know when to stop talking. Now, Ziggy would hold auditions for the next generation of Ranger after Dylan proves himself to be the next Black Series Ranger, so everyone was on hiatus looking for the next Green Ranger. Now, Ziggy would hold massive tryouts and would invite literally everyone. I mean, ventriloquists to acrobatics to bad comedians and singers and all sorts of the like. Now, the only person that he found was this young woman who was amazing at her job. She could do all the major feats that was necessary for a ranger and impress them all. However, she would find out that, well, she was Tanya 7, a robot in disguise. Don't call her a transformer because that'd be copyright. Now, and she doesn't transform. However, at the same time, he is having a problem because of Fresno's Bob's men still believing that he owed them money, about $5 million worth. However, while trying to grab the morpher from Ziggy, the Fresno's Bob's men would be defeated and beat up by Tanya 7. Now, he would run throughout town, and then realizing that at the last second, if she really wanted to be the Ranger, well, he would have to pry it off his cold dead arm and attach the morpher to his arm, and he morphed. Now, the difference between all the other Rangers, why this would help, is because it was DNA synchronized to him. Once a Ranger, literally always a Ranger. However, when it's revealed that at the end of the episode who the Green Ranger was, most of them are just shaking their heads going, oh my gosh, why? Now, the rest of the group, after realizing this, would come to argue and basically blatantly disapprove of him. Even Dr. K would say that. However, it would be Dylan who basically stops our arguments and reminds him if it wasn't for him, well, Benjix virus would have it, and who's to say who else would be able part of the morphing grid, or as the biosphere, as Dr. K called it. Now, Ziggy was lacking of a ranger. He was not meant to be the ranger at all and lacked any and all skill to do so. He was more of a blundering fool. He was given a giant green axe that comes with his suit and did not know how to use it. He basically would start swinging and swing out of control like a Beyblade, going in any and all directions. Now, it was to be expected of him at this point not to have any skills, and he would have a new ability of teleportation that he did not know how to use, and mostly sent teleporting most of his clothes off rather than himself. Now, it'd be only later in the series did he get some knack of control of it, but not really. However, later in the series, he would also bring about several key questions that we've all been wanting to ask, such as why is there explosions behind when they morph? Also, does he have to scream at the top of his lungs to activate the morphing sequence? Which Dr. K, much to her annoyance, answered by saying it was the explosion is necessary as a release of energy as you went to morph, which makes sense, but it's good to hear it, finally. And why I must scream is because it's voice activated. But he also agreed, well, it doesn't impress the ladies. Which, again, to her annoyance, she just looked at him and probably growled. Now, through the rest of the series, Dr. K and Ziggy would basically come at odds. Now, Ziggy would not feel that it was at odds, but Dr. K would be very annoyed by him and openly hostile. However, we come to figure out that, well, she kind of had a crush on him, but we don't really realize it until much later in the series. Only upon after Jem and Gemma return does she start to defrost and start to explaining more about her character. Now, also, it seemed that Ziggy also was attracted to Dr. K. Now, they would have a weird relationship at first because Ziggy would admit that he did have some attraction and that he had a dream of them going on a date, but he also at the same moment would also say he had an attraction towards Tanya 7, saying she's kind of a hottie. Weird for Dylan later on, probably. Now, it would also become obvious later on that, as I said, that Dr. K would think well of Ziggy when she accidentally called him by name in front of Gemma, which is something she never did, always referring to the Rangers as Ranger Red or Green or Blue. Now, why she did this is she didn't want to get too close for fear of losing them, basically as a soldier, as a general would a soldier. Now, but she would also find more information because she named one of her passwords after him, and kind of led to more of her feelings going on. It was only through Summer figuring this out, though she lied to the Rangers to keep Dr. K's secret. Probably because, well, Dr. K knew Summer's secret that she was in love with Dylan. Now, the two would have a very interesting relationship when they both become trapped in a cave with a little air on Dr. K's birthday. Now, it would be found out that by Ziggy that it was his birthday, her birthday, and in the last moments he would put a puppet show for her because he was really good at shadow puppets, like creepily good. Like his hand shouldn't bend that way to form those things, but he was able to do so. And it would be in his last moments that it would bring her joy and make her smile. They were in the end saved, but a much closer look between the two. Now, in the end, after the war, it would announce they were going to open a children's school, which would teach the biofield and biophysics, and Ziggy would learn how to do shadow puppetry and cooking. It would be a good relationship, but it was not known what would happen after the fact. Now, it was also revealed that since he was no longer Ranger, he would need to call her something else. And so, she would just put her arm around Ziggy and not say anything in front of her friends. Now, Ziggy would return in Mega Force, but again, as just a cameo appearance, no major series, just at the end of the last battle, as well as at the end of Beast Morphers, just showing as a little cameo on the screen, waving and saying basically good Rangers, but never actually voicing anything. He was also shown in the Shattered Grid, fighting against Lord Draken's army, but nothing major continued on going there. He's just basically seen fighting and no real dialogue. Now, to wrap up this character, Ziggy is a very annoying character, but he was necessary for the show's humor as well as showing he is kind-hearted. He went from a criminal background that wasn't really needed to be a Ranger or even destined to be a Ranger in the eyes of anyone, but proved that he could overcome those gaps of lack of skill and prove that he was a necessary part of the Ranger force needed to defeat Vengex. Through his friendship with Dylan and his love interest with Dr. K, he proved to shape the Rangers in other ways, and that what makes him a great Ranger. Now, that's the end of this episode. I hope you guys liked it. Please comment, subscribe, and make sure to like up there. Hit that bell, you know how it is. And tune in tomorrow for the next episode of our little genre, Ranger Black, Dylan.